Crocodile Dundee is a 1986 Australian comedy film set in the Australian Outback and in New York City. It stars Paul Hogan as the weathered Mick Dundee. Hogan's future wife Linda Kozlowski portrayed Sue Charlton.Inspired by the true-life exploits of Rodney Ansell. The film was made on a budget of under $10 million as a deliberate attempt to make a commercial Australian film that would appeal to a mainstream American audience, but proved to be a worldwide phenomenon. Released on the 30th of April 1986 in Australia, and on the 26th of September 1986 in the United States. It was the second highest-grossing film in the United States in that year and went on to become the second highest-grossing film worldwide at the box office as well, with an estimated 46 million tickets sold in the U.S. There are two versions of the film, the Australian version and an international version, which had much of the Australian slang replaced with more commonly understood terms, and was slightly shorter. Although the film was a hit both in Australia and abroad, it became controversial with some Australian critics and audiences who resented the image of Australians as being redneck. These views were largely put to rest as the unsophisticated larrikin bushman has long been firmly entrenched in Australian-related pop culture. Crocodile Dundee was followed by two sequels, Crocodile Dundee 2 and Crocodile Dundee in Los Angeles, although both films failed to match the critical success of the predecessor. Plot: Sue Charlton is a feature writer for Newsday and is dating her editor, Richard Mason. She travels to Walkabout Creek, a small hamlet in the Northern Territory of Australia, to meet Michael J. Crocodile Dundee, a bushman reported to have lost half a leg to a saltwater crocodile before crawling hundreds of miles to safety. On arrival in Walkabout Creek, she cannot locate Dundee, but she is entertained at the local pub by Dundee's business partner Walter "Wally" Riley, who does his best to explain the town and some of its inhabitants, including the towering Hulk Donk, who wins money by placing a glass of beer on his head and challenging people to try and spill the beer by punching him in the stomach. When Dundee arrives that night, Sue finds his leg is not missing, but he has a large scar which he refers to as a love bite. While Sue dances with Dundee, a group of city kangaroo shooters make fun of Dundee's status as a crocodile hunter, causing him to knock the leader out with one punch. Feeling lucky, he then challenges Donk and makes him spill the entire glass by kissing him on the lips and startling him into dropping the tankard. At first, Sue finds Dundee less legendary than she had been led to believe, being unimpressed by his pleasant-mannered but uncouth behavior and clumsy advances towards her. However, she is later amazed when in the Outback, she witnesses Mick subduing a water buffalo, taking part in an Aboriginal tribal dance ceremony, killing a snake with his bare hands, and scaring away the kangaroo shooters from the pub from the cruel sport of shooting kangaroos. Mick shoots at the truck using a dead kangaroo as cover, making them think the kangaroo is shooting at them, which in the drunken state causes them to flee. The next morning, offended by Mick's assertion that as a Sheila, she is incapable of surviving the Outback alone, Sue goes out alone to prove him wrong but takes his rifle with her at his request. Mick follows her to make sure she is okay, but when she stops at a billabong to refill her canteen, she is attacked by a large crocodile and is rescued by Mick. Overcome with gratitude, Sue finds herself becoming attracted to him. Sue invites Mick to return with her to New York City on the pretext of continuing the feature story. At first Wally scoffs at her suggestion, but he changes his mind when she tells him the newspaper would cover all expenses. Once in New York, Mick is perplexed by local behavior and customs but overcomes problematic situations including two encounters with a pimp and two attempted robberies. After this, Sue realizes her true feelings for him, and they kiss. At a society dinner at her father's home in honor of Sue's safe return and of Mick's visit, Richard proposes marriage to Sue, and in a haze of confused emotions, she initially accepts in spite of Richard having recently revealed his self-centered and insensitive true colors. During a period of intoxication, Mick, disheartened at Sue's engagement, decides to go walkabout around the U.S., but Sue has a change of heart and, deciding not to marry Richard, follows Mick to a subway station. There, she cannot reach him through the crowd on the platform, but has members of the crowd relay her message to him, whereupon he climbs up to the rafters and walks to Sue on the heads and raised hands of the onlookers and kisses her. Cast: Paul Hogan as Michael J. Crocodile Dundee, Linda Kozlowski as Sue Charlton, John Malone as Walter Riley, David Gulpilil as Neville Bell, Mark Blum as Richard Mason, Michael Lombard as Sam Charlton, Reginald Vell Johnson as Gus, Terry Gill as Duffy, Steve Rackman as Donk, Jerry Skilton as Nugget, David Brax as Bert, Peter Turnbull as Trevor, Rick O'Leary as Danny, Christine Totos as Rosita, Graham Grace Walker as Angelo, Caitlin Clark as Simone, Nancy Mehta as Carla, John Snyder as Pimp, Anne Carlisle as Gwendolyn, Anne Francine as Fran, Paige Matthews as Party Girl, Paula Greco as New Yorker. Production. The idea to make the film came to Paul Hogan when he was in New York. He wondered what it would be like if a Northern Territory bushman arrived in town. Paul Hogan: There's a lot about Dundee that we all think we're like, but we're not, because we live in Sydney. He's a mythical outback Australian who does exist in part, the frontiersman who walks through the bush, picking up snakes and throwing them aside, living off the land, who can ride horses and chop down trees and has that simple, friendly, laid-back philosophy. It's like the image the Americans have of us, so why not give them one? We've always been desperately short of folk heroes in this country. Ned Kelly is pathetic. So are the bushrangers. The film's budget was raised through the 1OBA tax concessions via Morgan Share brokers. Paul Hogan used his regular collaborators from TV, including John Cornell, Peter Feynman, and Ken Shady. Linda Kozlowski was imported to play the American reporter. Actors Equity Australia objected to this but eventually relented. 6 weeks of filming were spent working out of Jar Jar, an abandoned uranium mining camp in Kakadu National Park in the Northern Territory, with an additional week in Cloncurry. There was a further 6 weeks filming in New York. Filming finished on the 11th of October 1985. A number of minor changes were made to the film for its US release. When the film finished, Hogan said he expected it would make millions of dollars around the world. Hogan also said of the film, "I'm planning for it to be Australia's first proper movie. I don't think we've had one yet, not a real, general public, successful, entertaining movie." Reception. Critical reaction. The film has a rating of 89% on Rotten Tomatoes. James Berardinelli of ReelViews.net gave the film 3 stars out of 4, stating, "What the storyline lacks in ambition, it makes up for in sheer unfettered likability." Box office. Crocodile Dundee debuted at number 1, and was a worldwide box office hit. The film grossed $47,707,045 at the box office in Australia, which is equivalent to $118,305,664 in 2014 dollars. The film was released theatrically in the United States by Paramount Pictures in September 1986. It grossed $174,803,506 at the U.S. box office. It was the second highest-grossing film that year for both the studio and the United States box office. Box Office Mojo estimates that the film sold over 46 million tickets in North America. Sequels: Crocodile, Dundee 2, Crocodile Dundee in Los Angeles. Awards.